All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another Geeks Vegas Lines Daily Fantasy Football and Betting Angles podcast. This one, week 9 of the 2019 fantasy football season, and we are brought to you by FantasyDraft, the home of Rake free daily fantasy sports, and Overlay DFS, the home of Start Sit Fantasy and the Progressive Jackpot. My name is Kevin Allen. I am back with my man, Long Sez and Statsational, John Alessia, to break down the Week 9 slate. And John is our newest Fanduel 100,000-aire. So congrats on that, my man.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was a good night.
Hell yeah.
Right through it.
Says, have you won 100,000 recently? What's your deal?
I have, Monopoly money, maybe. No, but real, John, that is unbelievable. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
That's got to be very satisfying. Almost as satisfying as before we were on listening to the Geek burp from that Burger King he was eating.
Yeah, I don't envy his wife one bit.
So. Let me tell you something. And this is a piece of advice. I give out a lot of fantasy advice, but here's some life advice. If T-Mobile sends you a coupon or a free Whopper promotion, don't fall for it, man, because you'll regret it afterwards. That's all I'm going to say.
I don't know if you're done regretting it.
Oh,
I'm just going to leave it at that.
The regrets have only started. Now that we've talked about it, of course, when Alan's wife, who is my dietitian, sees this, I can only fathom the angry phone call that's probably going to show up about cholesterol and all kinds of terrible things.
I would keep it a secret, but she is now a fan of this podcast, so she'll be watching certainly once repurposed.
That means my wife will know as well, which is, because she is not a fan. She does not watch my podcast.
Yep.
But I need to speak to Sez's wife, actually.
No problem.
I got all sorts of gut biome stuff I want to ask her.
That is Stacy's. That's Stacy's.
It's her wheelhouse.
Yeah, that's her wheelhouse. You start talking about biomes. Yeah,
I'm all about it. I'm gonna have to talk to her.
Yeah, we'll put that on the Heal from Food podcast. But John, congratulations on your big win.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, no, good stuff. So to start the week again, week 9, we are going to fly over the pond and we're going to go see Houston at the London home team, which is Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville really does have a little bit of a home field advantage there. They've built a lot of fan bases by going there for years. They're getting 2.5 points, total of 46.5. John, do people normally, is there less, more, or indifferent action when the games are in London?
I think there's a little bit, it depends. When it's that early start, that 9:30 start, there's definitely less. And that's just because, think about certainly the bulk of the action that's coming in Vegas. That's super early. That's 6:30 in the morning over there. So they're missing some of the casual bettors there. But from the pro bettor standpoint, they don't really care where that game's being played. But yeah, the casual bettor probably is going to forget to play that game at 9:30. So there's going to be a little bit less money on it.
So this one is a tea and crumpets game. It is 9:30. So where's the money going? I mean, so you're saying that some of the casual bettors get pushed out. So when you look at the betting pool, this is probably a little bit more of a sharper pool. We can get a better lean on where the quote smart money is going.
Yeah, sometimes, things have changed a little bit with the online betting, but for the most part, I think a lot of people still wake up on Sunday morning and kind of put their bets in, the average bettor. But what we're seeing now is Houston is taking the most money, 63-37 on the spread there. And then with the total at 46.5, we're seeing a pretty significant amount coming in on the under. 80% of the money is coming in under the 46.5. So I think that's interesting. In this game, I think the number is probably, I'm going to look at my numbers here on this game, but I've got it. My total was just a little bit higher. I had Houston as a 1-point favorite, 1.5 point favorite, just about, and about 49. So I thought this would be a little bit higher on the total.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe that, Jacksonville, sometimes there's institutional bias. They're known as a defensive team by the casual bettor. Maybe that drives the market number down a little bit. Who knows? Geek, when you talk about this, would this be on the main slate, if it's a 9:30 game, or no?
No, the only way to get exposure to this game is to play the Thursday through Monday, which I always play. But I always play it, but I play a little bit more cash. I just like to make 1 or 2 really cash lineups for that, or a hybrid that I can adjust on Saturday. So I don't like to get too many of the non-main slate games all caught up in there unless I have to.
That's fine. I just love talking about this type of game, though, because there are players that are significant and fun to play. So I'm just curious, who those players are for you, and is the DFS community in general taking Darren Fells, the tight end on Houston, for real now?
Oh man, I mean, you have to start taking him a little for real. I don't want to go too crazy. Listen, what he did last week, he did on 6 targets. We're not talking about a guy who is getting an average of even 6 targets a game here, but he's had 3 games of 6 or more, or he had a 7 target game so far. So he's got to be in discussion, and I think that the loss of Fuller really spoke to. We should have really thought of that. I went to Stills, and a lot of us did last week, but in actuality, it seemed to advantage Fells a lot more.
Well,
so that was really interesting. And
I just have a quick take on Fells, and I want to hear what you have to say about it. That's why I interrupted you there. Is that normally we chase yards and catches and targets, but I think this is a very specific case because Darren Fells is 6'7". He's a 33-year-old journeyman, but when you have a potentially Hall of Fame quarterback, All-Pro quarterback in Deshaun Watson, this guy literally has a 50% chance for a touchdown every single game, and they're going to be in the red zone a lot. They're going to be projected to score 27 points plus. I think he's live for a touchdown every week. That's why I like Fells.
Absolutely live for a touchdown. But I mean, in fairness, they've also jacked up his salary now to where he's now being he's 4K. So I mean, actually, let me give you some of the other names that are in that range, and it'll give you an idea. Like all of the tight end salaries came up this week, but that's about where you get a Jimmy Graham. That's about where you get a Vance McDonald. That's about where you get a Chris Herndon or now a Jonnu Smith. A lot of these, it's above a Greg Olsen, for example. So, and it's not far below Zach Ertz this week. So, probably not where I'm going.
Okay.
But he deserves. I liked him a lot better when he was like a sub 3K, super punt. But we've got a little something different. This game overall, I mean, it does hold some DFS interest. I think every week you have to be not this week. Actually, quite honestly, I'm not this week. But in general, I've been interested in Leonard Fournette like every week of the season because of just a massive amount of value that he gets. I'm not interested in him here because there are just other running backs for similar or cheaper on the slate that are set up much better. Or more expensive that are set up. He's just falling in a weird spot for me for a guy that doesn't score any touchdowns ever. So of course I enabled this, but the Houston Texans pass defense has not been great. And especially with the loss of Jalen Ramsey. So if you wanted to go not with Jalen Ramsey, but that has nothing to do with them. But nonetheless, they haven't been great this year. They're giving up the second or third most points to opposing fantasy wide receivers this season. And therefore, like a DJ Shark and a D.D. Westbrook kind of have some slight sort of, not a whole lot of it, but maybe if I was playing the slate kind of appeal. But really, this game is death to DFS. I don't like it. I like what the Jaguars have done in London games. They seem to, as you said earlier, be pretty good at them for whatever reason. But overall...
Then we won't spend too much time on it.
Yeah, overall, this is a turd for DFS purposes.
Yeah, John, I just, where is Deshaun Watson in the MVP betting odds? I took him in the beginning of the season at, I think it was plus 400. I don't even think those are the greatest odds, but it's got to be better than that now. I'm pretty happy with the bet.
I've got to look that up, but I believe Aaron Rodgers now is the favorite.
Wow, interesting.
But Watson is probably up there. I haven't looked at that future bet. While we're going, I'll take a look at it and see where we're at on that. But last time I saw it, I'm pretty sure it was Rodgers in front. And if the Packers continue on the roll they are, and who knows who's going to get the buys or the home field advantage throughout the playoffs in the NFC. That's going to have a lot to do with it. And obviously Rodgers has a pretty big name, so he'll be tough to beat.
Yeah, I mean, I have Green Bay game down the list a little bit. I'm actually going to skip to it now because I do want to talk about this a little bit more. Green Bay is going to the LA Chargers. The Chargers are going to get a field goal and a half. The total's 47, John. Now, in addition to doing your usual analysis on this, I'm curious, how the hell is Aaron Rodgers having an MVP season with literally bad wide receivers? Not okay ones, but with Devontae Adams off the field, bad wide receivers. I thought they were a lock to trade for a receiver.
You would have thought so, but why bother when he's able to do what he's doing with the guys that he has, right? We've seen this with other quarterbacks. I mean, look at what Brady's done in some years with really not much of a wide receiving core. And then look what he's done when he's had guys like Randy Moss, right? Like those guys are just special players for a reason. And, Rodgers, I talked about this in an article I wrote this week when I talk about the power rankings. Rodgers has consistently beat my numbers. Brady's been another guy who's been able to do that. And Russell Wilson's another one. And we talked about this earlier in the year. It kind of looked like Mahomes was going down that path, but we couldn't really say for sure yet. But yeah, this is a game where it's kind of an odd. The line I think is a little bit lower than I would have had this game. Is it still 3.5? I'm looking at my numbers right now.
Yeah, I can pull it up.
Yeah, no, I've got it up here. But when I was looking at it last night, and it's 3.5, and it's not surprising. I mean, all the money's coming in on almost everything is coming in on Green Bay, and this is one of those that I would say early on. Not early on in my betting career, but I would say early on when I started to become a little bit sharper, this was a game I would have just auto bet the Chargers because I would just always want to be contrarian,
right?
Where I thought
that used to be a thing. Like just
it definitely was a thing. It was kind of like fade
the public,
just fade the game that looks so obvious. And this is one that kind of looks obvious, but as I've dug deeper into this stuff, you just don't fade. Don't fade Aaron Rodgers in these situations. So either you like this game from a Green Bay standpoint, or you're just not going to take it. That's kind of my view on Rodgers and Brady at this point. And it just looking at the total, everyone likes this game to go over as well. It went up from 46 up to 48, and that's again all the tickets and all the money is coming in on the over side of this game. So just quickly glancing over at my numbers, I had the total a little bit lower than this. I had it at like a 46. I thought that the total should be, about 46. So that's where I was on that. And I thought this should be like a 7-point spread. I just think the line, what have the Chargers really done to, look at every one of the Charger games this year. I mean, what have they done that's so impressive and compared to Green Bay?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. You're listening to the Geeks Vegas Lines. Kevin, get into where the fantasy value is outside of Aaron Jones and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, if your name isn't Aaron, are you going to produce anything in this game?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough from a daily fantasy DFS point of view because, you mentioned Aaron Jones already and Jamal Williams, and I'm not paying the salary. Jamal Williams is getting progressively jacked up in price to the point where both of these guys are a little too expensive for me from a point of view of running backs that don't get a full workload. Aaron Jones, we talked about it on the Showdown breakdown this past week. I told everybody to go all in on Aaron Jones, to load up on the running game, partially because the models and John's model, but our models as well, all of the models basically pointed to one thing, that the Chiefs can't stop the run. Well, we have a similar situation here with the Chargers. They've been kind of bad against the run, not as bad as the Chiefs, who are like 31st or 32nd ranked, but the Chargers are in the bottom half of the league against the run. They're a little bit better versus the past this season because they have quality cornerback play. So, yeah, I like that running game for Green Bay again. But, I mean, Aaron Jones on this slate, compared to the other guys at that salary, just isn't going to see as much volume. So there's a little bit of risk there. And there's a lot of recency bias. Last couple games he smashed. On the Chargers side, man, it would be so nice if it was just one running back to choose from. If we could play Austin Eckler, here, or Melvin Gordon, old school Melvin Gordon, at 5K on DraftKings this week. But I mean, and I don't hate Gordon. I don't hate either play, but I don't like them, because they really are eating from each other. And it's just not enough volume to get where we need them to take us. Hunter Henry would be interesting if he wasn't 6K. Again, there's a lot of weird shit going on here where salaries just got jacked up on. If we talk about DraftKings as a whole this week, for example, they jacked up salaries in almost a cruel and unusual way to where you really have to change some approaches to certain things. And this is one of them. I mean, Hunter Henry coming in at 6K, and that is like where George Kittle has been all year. That's where Ertz started out the season. Like, they've jacked up some of these guys significantly. So they've almost made it in this particular game very difficult. And the Packers outside cornerback play is so strong. The Chargers pretty good. Packers has been almost elite. So you're really not gonna have a ton of great action coming from the Chargers passing game outside of maybe Keenan Allen out of the slot, who gets the best matchup of the group. So again, not a game I'm going to focus on heavily. And in my initial read on this game, the one that interests me the most was definitely Aaron Rodgers from a tournament perspective, because his range of outcomes is like from 10 to like 40. He has got a massive range of outcomes both this season and any given game. Like last week, he would have gotten a shit score, but he threw all the touchdowns to Aaron Jones. But if Aaron Jones is not scoring that way, then Rodgers doesn't put up anywhere near the score. If he's doing it on the run, Rodgers doesn't do shit. So, there's a big range of outcomes depending on whether he hands him the football or whether he throws him the football.
Yeah, no, that's a really good take. I agree. Hey, our friends over at FantasyDraft, the only rake-free daily fantasy site, brings the heat again with the $300,000 guaranteed rake-free contest, the Hooters main event. This is the largest and only rake-free contest of its kind you'll find for Week 9. Remember, only on FantasyDraft are 100% of entry fees paid to the contest winners. Sign up at FantasyDraft.com with referral code ARMY, that's ARMY, and you'll get a free 7-day trial membership. Hey, rake-free fantasy. We talk about it all the time, and we love our friends over at FantasyDraft, but explain for those who are watching for the first time, who just maybe a little bit more than casual players, maybe, they play maybe, 10 lineups a week or 20 lineups a week, not 100 lineups a week. What's so important? Both of you guys, I want to hear your takes. Rake-free fantasy.
Let me make it very clear. And this, I hope for everybody who's listening, for every DFS Army subscriber, for every listener out there, that this kicks into your head, because it's a very simple thing. If your goal in doing daily fantasy sports is to try to be a profitable player, if that's one of the things that interests you, and I know that's not everybody. There are people who play that are just there to do a scratch-off ticket, and I get that too, and I do not criticize it. If that's what you're into, like a scratch-off lotto ticket, but that's one thing. You just enter the Millie Maker every week, whatever. You should do that on Fantasy Draft too anyway. But if you play to try to be a profitable player, and a lot of us do, a lot of us try really hard to be profitable players, everybody who is sharp understands that Fantasy Draft is where you should be playing. There's no way that giving up 15% of your entry fees every single time you enter a contest is a long-term profitable approach for 99% of people. So if you look at a site like Fanduel Draftkings, let's say 5 to 10% of the players there have a chance to be long-term profitable because they're eating a lot of the rake at 10, 15%. On Fantasy Draft, there is a legit chance for 40 to 50% of the people competing to be profitable players. John, I mean, am I missing something in that? Like,
No. I think the average person doesn't realize how much they're paying in VIG. Real simple. Go into whatever site you're using, figure out what the entry fee is, multiply that by the number of entries, and then the amount that they're paying out. That difference is what you're paying in VIG. All right. And then figure out what that percentage is, and that's what each individual person is paying. And then you'll realize
almost every contest is 15%. So
it's about 15, 16% on a lot of these big ones. Yeah.
So people don't understand how much they're paying these operators to run the contest, which is great. But as a DFS community, I'm calling on all of you who are listening. Let us come together. Let us support the rake-free concept, because that is the greatest thing for the long-term health of the daily fantasy sports ecosystem. If everybody has a better chance to win, if 50% of players have a chance to be winners or profitable, as opposed to 10%, maybe 12% on heavy rake sites, we will be able to play longer. We will be able to play more. We'll be able to deposit less. So check it out. Go to Fantasy Draft. I play there. I'm moving more and more of my action there every single week. I love NBA there. DFS Army has our optimizers all set up for Fantasy Draft, NBA, NFL, whatever you play there. And if you're about to make another deposit on DraftKings stop. go and do it on Fantasy Draft, and you'll see a much better site. Plus, a week like this where it's running back, there's 4 flexes and 2 wide. You only have to choose 2 wide receivers instead of 3. Give me that every week. I don't want to
belabor the point, but I have to say, like, when I'm a big season long and dynasty football guy. That's my area of expertise. That's my specialty. But I do play 5 to 15 lineups a week, and I have to say, when I go on FantasyDraft.com, it's just easier for me to like consume. It doesn't feel like I'm walking into like Vegas with lights and it's like it's not overwhelming. Like, oh, okay, I go here, I go there. So that's what I like about it, is a little bit more casual player. So FantasyDraft.com. Go check them out. All right, boys, let's move on. Tennessee going to Carolina. Carolina, 4-point favorite. Total is 41. Again, I think Carolina, John, is probably the better team. Just had a terrible showing last week. Kyle Allen might feel he's on the ropes a little bit. I think another loss is going to give the Panthers cover to bring back Cam. I like Kyle Allen. I think he's a tough QB. I love Carolina in this matchup. Where are the numbers going in this one?
So it's interesting. Yeah, everyone seems to like Carolina as well. 72% on Carolina, but the game opened at 4.5, and now it's down to 3.5. So you have to wonder sometimes when you see a move like that, when you see money coming in on one side of the game, yet the line doesn't move in that same direction. A lot of times what that can mean is there's some smart money on that game on the other side. So they've moved it down to 3.5. Doesn't always work that way, but you could that could be what we're seeing. They call that like a reverse line movement. So the money is coming in on Carolina. The public definitely likes Carolina at 3.5. I do think Carolina is the better team. And we spoke about that with Allen. It would be a lot easier for Carolina to bring in Cam off a bad outing and certainly could do that off of last week. And we thought that could be the case last week when they went up against that defense that San Francisco's got. So on the total, let's take a look at what we're looking at. We've got 41.5. That's actually up from 40. So it's moved up 1.5. But now the money's starting to come in on the under 70%, 70% of the money on the under, but predominant amount of tickets are on the over. So when we see that disparity in the two, that's another indication as well that the money might be more right than the tickets. The tickets tend to be more of the public. And if we get a big money sum, that tends to be a little bit of the sharper or smarter action. So be a little leery. This looks like a game that's not going to have a lot of points, might not be a very good daily fantasy outside of the guy who seems to be money every single week, and that's McCaffrey.
Yeah, no, McCaffrey's money in the bank. Even when he has a bad game, he gives you 20 fantasy points. So that's how you know he's the real deal. Geek, start with the Tennessee side. I mean, Ryan Tannehill is breathed life. Is that the right word? Breathed life. Given life. He's given life to the passing game. Jonnu Smith, a favorite of ours in season long in the dynasty community. He was a 3rd-round pick, has some draft pedigrees in that typical 3rd-year breakout. Could we be seeing the start of something really great? Is he worth using could the Millie Maker have Jonnu Smith in it now with Ryan Tannehill under center?
The Millie Maker okay. So let me that segues me into a story. We had a member win Cuggy win $50K taking down the DraftKings NFL $9 slant this week. And every single play was off the Geeks pick sheet, by the way, which I'm pretty excited by. And the one that wasn't was Jonnu Smith. So that was the one play that missed. And what he said was, he was in the channel, and he had actually had, I guess, a combination of Ebron and John Brown with his last 2 spots. And when they found out that it was going to be all windy, when we were talking about the wind in Buffalo, he's like, I had to make a swap. So I went up to Kenny Galladay, which was 700 more than John Brown. And in order to fit it, I had to go down from Eric Ebron to Jonnu Smith. Well, that swap was worth like a shitload of fantasy points. He winds up not only winning the DraftKings $9 slant, but beating by like 7 or 8 points the same guy who won the Millie Maker and was in this contest. And so that guy who won the Millie Maker with the, I think it was a 259, and Cuggy got a 266 or something, but the 259. So he passed the Millie Maker winner and got an even bigger score from that late swap, which was pretty awesome. So the takeaway is, I remember. I just wanted to humble brag that one of our guys won 50
Yeah,
grand.
no, and that's not a humble brag. Those are real stories, man, and those are from real members. Those aren't just run of them. Those aren't like your pros. Those are those got to be proud father moments for you. I mean, you are fathering these guys. You are teaching them. You are mentoring them. You and your whole team, and then all of a sudden they come back and like they bring home the first place trophy. I mean, that's got to be like quite a thrill.
I love it. I live for our guys winning. I live for that shit, especially when they're using the sheet, the content that I work all week on, that I put out my pick sheet, and like you see all 4-star and 5-star plays, and I was like, holy shit! And then I'm like, wait, how come I didn't come up with that combo? That's the other thing, but I'm okay with that. We don't do a ton of promotion, a self promotion on this. We let the content speak for itself, but that's a really good segue there. Just to tell people to go join DFS Army today. Use promo code Geek, Sez, or Statsational, or all three. Sign up 3 times. And what you should do is you have coaches there that will help you and teach you, not just give you the picks, but actually teach you how to be a better DFS player. I recommend watching Geek's interview with Bobby Wow, who won $1 million a few weeks ago. And Bobby does a really great job of articulating how only a few years ago he was a dollar game player, and now he's graduated to a little bit bigger stakes where he won the $1 million. So I don't want to make the whole podcast about promotion, but certainly that felt like a natural segue. Let's move on. Yeah, well, we'll continue with this game. We got to talk about it. It's actually very important.
Yep.
We can't skip this game. So Ryan Tannehill has created a competency for the Titans that didn't exist with the horrible that was Marcus Mariota, who I'm not even going to mention your trade of Aaron Jones from Marcus
bad.
Mariota.
It was bad.
So I'm not even going to talk about that.
In Superflex, by the way, I see John saying, "What the hell is he doing?" It's Superflex.
Yeah. I'm not going to talk about that because you already feel that pain. I don't want to bring it up. But the models are showing low scoring. The models are showing not a lot of run, even for McCaffrey. Like if you look at John's model, the Statsational model, we are not seeing where 150 yards are expected for this team at all. As a matter of fact, it's on the low side here with just I think it was like 100 and now of course I can't find it, but it was something in the range of 100 and
on the 125 on the yardage.
Yeah, 125 there. So
yeah.
on the low, that's on the low side for a Christian McCaffrey helm team. So the biggest decision this week, obviously McCaffrey is unfadeable.
Right.
The best
matchup
proof, almost like as matchup proof as they get. But this isn't the best matchup, though. It's important to know it's not the worst matchup, but it's not the best. I think that the Titans are only giving up like 9. They're giving up under 100 yards per game to opposing running backs. So it's not a great matchup. He's priced up like crazy. It doesn't matter. You got to play this guy, right? I don't mind the passing game. You can't pass against the Panthers. So that promotes Derrick Henry as a potential running back play this week. The Panthers just have been terrible against the run and very good against the pass. It's like the opposite of the Bucs. Like if you took the Bucs and reversed them, that's the Panther. It's kind of weird. Same division. But so that's a thing. And so Derrick Henry projects pretty well here. And then for the I don't like Ryan Tannehill in this one. I loved Ryan Tannehill last week. I don't like him in this game the same because the matchup just is not the same. But for the Panthers, if they could get if Tennessee is successful in slowing down the running game at all, then Curtis Samuel should benefit. He is coming off an 11 target game. He's just been getting targeted quite a bit. He's doing just fine out there. So Curtis Samuel's in a decent spot here to take advantage of that. And DJ Moore, of course, same difference, and they're both relatively cheap. I think DJ Moore. Would you say higher floor for DJ Moore, John?
Higher floor, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like a little bit higher floor with Samuel, a little bit more GPP upside. So that's how I'd paint those two. But I don't mind either one of those guys on a week where we need to find salary relief. For the Titans passing game, I don't think they're going to have a ton of success. I think Bradbury will be on Corey Davis, which will open up things for A.J. Brown a little bit. Although, what if they put Bradbury on Brown? I don't know. It's hard to know who the number one wide receiver is or what the perceived number one wide receiver is for the Titans. And Jonas Smith in play. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's a guy I'm looking. He was the top. He was our cover boy for our waiver wire season long podcast this week. So yeah, he's the big guy in a tough tight end year. All right. So in a rematch, John, of the 1982 AFC Championship game, the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, it's pretty funny you say that. I was literally talking about this game on Sunday because I have some buddies in from New York, and we were talking about like some of the first memories you have of football. That championship game was one of the first. The AJ Dewey game, which nobody on this podcast is going to remember, but AJ Dewey just tore the Jets up, and they went to the Super Bowl and lost to the John Riggins led Washington Redskins. But yeah, that was one of my first memories of the NFL.
Yeah, for those of you who are listening, yes, it is true. The Jets and the Dolphins were in the AFC Championship game in the 1982 season. The Dolphins won that game 14-0. But in fast forward 35, 40 years, whatever it is, the Dolphins are getting 3 at home. I don't even know about this one. I mean, with the Jets, I've gone from being confident in the team to no confidence at all. There's been a lot of trade rumors. John, are the bettors even looking at this one? Is this a serious game with potentially the Dolphins trying to lose games? I mean, I know the players aren't, but
you look. That was the thing early in the year. People were saying, "Well, I can't bet on Miami. They're tanking." Yet, I believe it's 3 in a row that they've covered now.
Well, the spreads have been outrageous.
The spreads have been outrageous. Now they're in a situation. They're in a situation where they're a lot closer. In a matchup, they're a lot closer to the Jets than they have been any other team that they've played. You have to think this is a game where, listen, the 50 some odd guys who go out on that field on Sunday, they're trying to win, right? They're fighting for their jobs. The coaches are fighting for their jobs. It's one thing that the front office is tanking and they're getting rid of players, but those guys on the field, for the most part, there's very few of those guys are guaranteed anything. So they're trying to win. And I think this is, it's a game for pride. Not saying they're going to come out there and win, but they will play hard. They're not, the players themselves are not looking to roll over. So I'd be leery of that. I'm always leery of that in the NFL. It's a little different in the NBA, but in the NFL, you get seriously hurt if you're not going all out. So
and they're trying to, like you said, it's a job audition for their next team.
It is. I mean, you're either going to go to another team or you're trying to stay here when they have, the 5 draft picks that they're going to get in the first round or 2 coming up. So, you're hoping to stay in this league as long as possible. And that's the majority, that's 90% of the guys in this league are just fighting to be here next year. So anyway, with that said, of course, most of the money's coming in on the Jets at minus the 3, which is pretty understandable. Because of all the reasons that we've talked about with just how bad the perception is of this Miami team. And the total of 41 is pretty split. It's 50-50. My view of this is, and we've talked about it before, when you've got kind of bad teams, you had the Miami-Washington game, which was 2 bad teams. Now you've got the Miami-Jet game, which is 2 bad teams again. These games shape up to be almost like preseason games, although I think the Jets are a little bit better than, let's say, Miami. They're definitely better than Miami and probably better than Washington as well, personnel wise. But it seems like when you have bad teams, the defense, it's easier to play defense than it is offense, and so these games tend to be low scoring, and they tend not to be great DFS type of games outside of maybe defensive teams, DSTs.
Kevin the Geek, I almost had to ask you, should I be playing Ty Montgomery when there was trade rumors that Le'Veon Bell was being shipped off? Thank God he wasn't. He still looks like peak Le'Veon Bell to me. Although, since Darnold has come back, they haven't been feeding him the rock. Is this hands off from a fantasy perspective, or do you like to throw a dart with one of those wide receivers on either side?
Yeah, no, I don't think this is a hands-off game at all. I think there's value will come from this game on the Jets side. Number one, let me say, bet the Jets. Okay, +3, -3. You want to bet the Jets in this one, or at least I do. This fucking Miami, they suck, right? I don't mind the Jets' defense here.
What do you think about? Didn't they just trade away one of their best defensive players?
No,
not best, but higher picks.
Exactly 0 sacks this year. They have other guys that they like replacing that guy. That was a good trade for the Jets too.
Oh yeah, I don't know why the Giants. That's a whole other discussion.
Don't even get me started. But I think there's going to be some pride issues. Jamal Adams, these men are going to come out and show why. Their chip on their shoulder for being involved in trade rumors. There's going to be a lot of that this week. The Jets are at home. Again, as long as Sam Darnold's thumb issue isn't going to be serious and it's on his left hand, shouldn't be an issue. As long as that doesn't come up as something, you want to bet the Jets here. Miami and the Jets are not on the same level of bad. Yes, the Jets have looked like shit, but remember, there's a whole set of circumstances around the Jets' suckitude where Miami is in there. That's they're being their best Dolphins. Like what you saw last week was the best version of Miami, which was they lucked into a couple of early touchdowns before they just completely imploded, and that was their best version of themselves. With the Jets, we've seen kind of like weird circumstances, and again, I'm not making excuses for a team, but I think they're just a better football team than the Dolphins, as you said, and more than a -3 favorite in my mind.
I just want to make a comment on what you just said. I think that what happens is teams, and this is just total projection on my part, but teams come in, they're like, oh, we're playing the Dolphins. And then they realize, whoa, we're in an actual game with a real NFL team. And then just because they have more talent in the second half, I mean, the Dolphins have been in every game early, and then they just get crushed in the second half because of talent. I think that what happens, teams go to sleep on them a little bit early on.
That happens all the time. I mean, that's how you lose your survivor leagues, right? Because some team that should just be getting their ass kicked, but then the defense doesn't show up and they were out drinking last night or whatever the hell. They weren't really paying close attention, or they weren't jacked up, or they're thinking about next week. That's a real thing that happens. Now, getting into this game, what you said is correct. Like, where are the touches for Le'Veon Bell? Why are you not feeding this man? He's in leaps and bounds the best player on this offense. Like, if he's a 1, the next best guy is like a 5. You know what I'm saying? Like, the drop off isn't it's massive from Le'Veon Bell to the next most talented player in this Jets offense. Feed this man the rock, especially against Miami. The only thing is, listen, DraftKings, they all jacked up the price on Le'Veon Bell. He has not shown this season even once that he can produce 20 plus or like a serious fantasy scoring potential. Certainly not on DraftKings, and even on Fanduel with the PPR. I mean, it took 10 receptions, 9 targets early week for him to get to 20 fantasy points. So Le'Veon Bell is in a spectacular spot. Not going to get better all season. This is the best. This is the unicorn match. There will never be a better matchup for this man all season long. If he's not going to do it now, he ain't doing it. But he's priced appropriately for what it is. They jacked up his salary. We're not getting value on it on DraftKings, really, or on FanDuel. So it's something to keep in mind. But I think the whole Jets passing game is in play here. Robbie Anderson, Jameson Crowder, even to a lesser extent, Demaryius Thomas could be played. Whoever they roll out at tight end, I suppose. And the
wait. Every time I see Ryan Griffin score a touchdown, I'm like, damn it, that's supposed to be Chris Herndon.
I know. And that's what I'm saying. Like, but what are you going to do? So I guess Jets tight end has been an okay thing this year so far. So is it a 40-point total, a game that I really want to go bananas on, though? If you're comparing this to other games that we have for similar price range, with much higher totals, with higher potential for more scoring opportunities, that's the challenge for Le'Veon Bell. His team is expected to have 2.5 scoring opportunities for touchdowns, maybe 3 max. So, if I can get a team that's going to have 4 scoring opportunities, touchdown opportunities to go around, that increases the odds of my running back getting at least one of them 25% or 50%. Whereas here, in order for him to get 2, he'd have to basically hit about 70% of the Jets touchdowns going through the hands of Le'Veon Bell. So there's always more risk when the team is just expected to score fewer points. But overall, I like the Jets side here. I don't mind if you want to play some of the pass catchers for Miami too, because the Jets have no secondary on this team whatsoever. They have no one.
Devontae Parker, certainly the coaches have said outwardly that they will expect him to be part of the plans going forward. All right, guys, we're about to talk about our friends at Overlay DFS, the Stardom Situm game, home of progressive jackpots. If you are tired of having to pick the perfect lineup and the perfect player at every position in order to win your salary cap DFS, Overlay DFS is for you. Tired of having the salary cap lineup out of the running of the money in the first 5 minutes? Does playing salary cap DFS feel like a job and not a game? Want a fantasy game where the pros with 150 lineups and computer algorithms can't dominate? Well, then OverlayDFS.com has a new revolutionary start-sit game for fantasy sports. It used to be home of the single-entry GPP, but now they're allowing you to do 10 entries in a contest, which is kind of cool. All right, guys, this is how you play. You make 12 start-sit decisions based on a bunch of 30 options that they give you. And then they give you a win, loss, or a tie for each decision that you make. Records in the top 10% will win 9x their buy-in. A 12-0 record hits the jackpot, and you win all that money. All matchups are player versus player who will have more fantasy points. Usually you can go about 8-4 and win, sometimes 9-3, and then occasionally 7-5. This week, the lineups are, and I just want to ask you guys, so I'm just going to call out a couple of the lineups they have going this week. You tell me, just snap call it. Don't overthink it. Who's going to have more fantasy points? Jimmy Garoppolo versus Kyler Murray. What say you guys?
No, I gotta go Murray in a horrible matchup because Jimmy G could get to 0.
I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna agree on that one with Murray.
Okay, Emmanuel Sanders or Deebo Samuel, the two 49ers receivers. Snap call.
Manny.
Yeah, Sam. Manny for me too.
Okay. Yeah. Robbie Gould, the kicker, versus the San Francisco defense. Who's going to have more fantasy points?
Ooh,
I'm going Frisco D on that one, man.
Yeah, I won't be playing it when I play overlay. So I'm going to say the kicker.
Yeah, so as you can see here, this is the fun you could have. I mean, this is how the whole game started, when you were literally sitting on a bar stool with people. Who's going to have more points? Who's going to do better? And they developed it into this amazing game. John, I didn't tell you this, Kevin, but he took down another tournament in overlay DFS this weekend.
Well, it was more head-to-head. It was a head-to-head.
Sorry, I took down another head-to-head.
But I did cash in the I cashed in the progressive too, because I think, like you said, if you come top 10%, you cash in that. Did not hit the progressive. I'm going to try to knock that thing down.
That counts even in a cash game?
No. So these were two different. I played a few different games, but the progressive I cashed in, I believe 8-4 or 9-3. I forget.
He can't keep track of his wins anymore, Kevin.
But on the head-to-heads, you only need 10. So it's a little bit less. So you do 10 picks with 3 alternates on these head-to-heads or these smaller games. And so far so good with those. I've been doing really well.
Yeah. Also, guys, they have an app if you want to download it. Just search Overlay DFS Fantasy Sports and download their app. It's a fun sweat, especially with basketball coming into its own now. They have baseball. They even have golf on there. So check that out. It's a fun game. OverlayDFS.com. And boys, let's get back to the action here. We already talked about the 1982 Super Bowl revenge game, but now let's move into a little bit more serious teams. Indianapolis off a tough week last week. They're going into Pittsburgh. This game's a pick'em. Is it still sitting at pick'em, John?
Taking a look, because I was just looking at my personal line. I had this at Pittsburgh -1.
Yeah, so it sounds about so. It's
a total right, and then it's flipped now. I'm seeing Pittsburgh +1 now. So
I'm going to look on my side.
-1. Yeah.
So yeah, give us all the numbers on this one. And
so the money, the money's been coming in pretty heavily on Indy, which is what flipped it. Be careful. So the line, when a line moves from a team -1 to +1, that's not as significant a move as you may think. A more significant move is if a team moves from 3 to 3.5 or 3 to 2.5, something like that. So you'll say, oh wow, they moved. They were a favorite, now they're a dog. That one is, very rarely do games end on 1. So books are more apt to move rather quickly on those numbers to try to even out the betting as opposed to key numbers. So just be careful on that, thinking that that's such a great move that they're a dog now. But that said, Pittsburgh is now getting a point here in this game at home from Indianapolis, and the public seems to be liking the Colts side of that game. If you go to the total of 43. The money is coming in pretty heavily, 95% worth on under the 43. So just flipping to what I had the total. So I had this game at 41. So I would kind of agree. I thought maybe 43 was a little too high. So my numbers are giving me about 41 on this game.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of fantasy goodness in this one, Geek. Last week, the rookie Deontay Johnson came alive. He's a big popular pickup in the season-long community, and it just seems like Pittsburgh keeps finding these wide receivers. And Emmanuel Sanders going back was a Pittsburgh Steeler. Mike Wallace, Antonio Brown, even going back to Hines Ward. They just are really good at finding wide receivers to develop. Now, are you good at finding the value in this game?
I mean, this game presents the number one value play on the entire slate. So yes, the top situation that we're monitoring right now for week 9 is, of course, the injury to James Conner and what that's going to mean for the slate as a whole, because Jalen Samuels is healthy. The coaches on record are saying they just kept him out. Like he practiced all week last week. They just kept him out of that game because they didn't think they needed him. So they just wanted to give him an extra week. And of course, Connor has the AC joint injury. I don't know what's going to happen with that. We don't know if it's a serious injury. Right now, the lean is yes, but I don't know. But assuming that Connor is out, Jalen Samuels emerges as the top pay down option across the entire slate, all sites, all sports, whatever. Straight up the top pay down option. He's 4K on DraftKings, similarly cheap on FantasyDraft. I believe he's 5K on Fanduel. So while this matchup isn't spectacular, and that's an important thing to note, like it's not like the greatest running back matchup on the board by far. The Colts have been good against the run this season. Give me Jalen Samuels with a full workload as part of the Steelers offense for 4K on DraftKings, similar on FantasyDraft. Hell yeah. You just put him in your lineup. You set it, you forget it. I don't think it's the same level of explosion upside as what we saw from Lats Murray last week, where you were just like, oh my God, he's going to destroy, because it was both a cheaper play and a spectacular matchup. But in this case, at 4K, like it's a can't fail situation, because as long as Samuels plays out this game, he's going to catch 4 or 5, maybe 6 passes over the course of the game. He'll get 15 to 18 runs. You know, there's borderline no way that he emerges with less than 12 to 14 fantasy points. And for 4K, I mean, that's all you need in all formats. So going beyond that, because that's the important stuff. You know, the usual suspects. Deontay Johnson's a great paydown option. At some point, we have to start to believe that, you know, it's not a fluke that this guy is getting 6 to 8 targets every single game under Mason Rudolph. I mean, if you look at every single game, he's getting between 6 to 8 targets, and that's tends to be enough for him to get you 10 plus fantasy points. And in a week where we want to pay up for running backs, we're looking for these cheaper wide receivers to make our lineups come together. He does seem to have some sort of a repertoire with Mason Rudolph.
And he gets these long touchdowns too. I think all of his touchdowns have been like 35 yards or longer, I read today, or most
40 yarders, 40, 39. He's got a 39 yard, a couple of 43s, you know, so he's been getting long touchdowns. Great. Juju Smith-Schuster had sort of an emergence game last week. Again, this Colts secondary, not spectacular, giving up points to opposing wide receivers. Again, not the highest total, so I don't want to get overly exposed to this game, which I don't think is going to be high scoring at all. It definitely projects as low scoring. But I mean, if I'm getting involved with the game, I guess somebody like a T.Y. Hilton could be used on the flip side. I'm not into Marlon Mack at all, really. He hasn't been doing it for me in terms of his ceiling all year, and I don't expect that to change here. Steelers defense is pretty tough. It's very tough against the run. It's definitely not the way I want to go. Marlon Mack is not in a good spot compared to other running backs in the salary range. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of it's coming right here from this running back, Jalen Samuels, and then Deontay Johnson, and maybe a little bit of the other 2 wide receivers. You might see some people wanting to take some shots on Zach Pascal, although I will tell you that's not how I plan to attack this game at all.
Yeah, Zach Pascal, no projectable floor at all. It's a very dangerous play. I mean, if you want to do one of those like that $5 bill lineups, like the $5 bill on fire lineups, I'm sure why not, but I just don't see the upside that's commensurate with that risk.
That one's for our lotto ticket scratchers that play over on DraftKings instead of moving their action over to FantasyDraft, because they don't care.
Yeah,
they don't care about being profitable.
Well said, well rounded. My question to you is, if for some reason, I know the news on Connor has gotten better as the week has gone on already, but if for some reason he was out, is Jalen Samuels one of those all-in plays, or is he just like, hey, let's get a nice little get some pieces of him?
For me, it's a borderline lock button. So whereas I went to 100% Latavius Murray last week, I'd probably be more like 80%, 80 to 85% Jalen Samuel.
That's an all-in play.
You could call it all in, and John, back me up on this, but the reason it's not 100% is because there's just that chance that one of these other running backs who are also cheap like that will score more points than him, because it's not a spectacular. So if he gets you 13 fantasy points, that doesn't win me $1 million for sure. Does that make John, what do you say on this one?
Yeah, I don't think he's an all-in as like Murray was last week. I played a little bit more high stakes stuff last week, and I just used Murray in every one of them. I don't think I would go that route with Samuel. I mean, I like him here, just don't nearly like it as much, because I think this is not a lock guarantee, 20-point type of outing.
Well, in that, I don't like to go off tangent when we do the Geeks pod, but I think the listeners would really, this is a good point. What makes an all-in play for DFS? Is there a short version to describe that from both of you?
Look at last week and what we saw with Latavius Murray. If you want to understand what an all-in play is, it's not just that you have a running back who's got great value because he was a backup thrust into a starting role. Combine that with the second thing, a team that produces fantasy points regularly to the running back position, which we had with the Saints. And actually, we have that with the Steelers. But the third component is the difference between this week and last, although I believe personally that the salary difference makes up for it. But in a good matchup with a high scoring. So last week, we not only saw a running back thrust into a starting role that normally is in a timeshare, we also got that running back being on a team that produces fantasy points to the running back position regularly. Again, the difference between that play and the Lions running back play, where you had a Lions team that does not produce fantasy points to the running back position. And the third was the matchup itself, both high scoring and a poor run defense for Arizona. Whereas, and this is, John, where I think you're coming from in this play, the Colts are, this is a low-scoring projected game, and the Colts are a top-of-the-league run defense. So a very different scenario, although my argument would be the cheaper, the value on the salary of Samuel makes up for the poorness of the matchup. John, I'd get your take on it, but that's like what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with all that. The thing for me on whether or not it's a shove all in play, at least last week with Murray, they couldn't just gear their whole defense to stop Murray. And even if they could, I don't know if they're good enough to do it, right? When you have, you've got Drew Brees there and Thomas, they have other weapons. And you're talking about a team in Arizona that's just given up points to, they've given up points to running backs. They've given up points to tight ends. It's just not a good team. The Colts have been not necessarily a team that we could pick on in DFS quite as easily. So I don't know if this is a game where you just say, oh, well, the whoever's running for Pittsburgh here is gonna be the nuts, and we're getting great value on Samuel. Expect him to have a good game, but just not. There's no guarantee in my mind that he's going to be the nut play here this week. And I mean, Pittsburgh just on the whole offensively has been a little disappointing.
Yeah, with no Ben, and presumably he was a little sore in that first game. That's understandable.
I want to add one more thing in though. He is a 100% cash game lock. Like because to say all in, we're talking about trying to win $1 million in a tournament. When you play a cash game, you take that kind of value every time. There's no, hey, let me think about it, I'm not sure. That is a lock button cash. And for me, a lock button hybrid play, meaning if I'm going to play some high dollar lineups, John, like you were talking about, like we do, like where I make most of my money is not, trying to make a millionaire maker. It's by, going up against 150 people at $250 an entry. If I'm in that contest, yeah, I mean, he's 100% of my entries in that. Again, I'm going to take the value in those. The value, he will be the highest points per dollar value on the entire slate comfortably by a good margin.
Yeah, so I guess a good example and a good transition to that. Minnesota is going to KC. That was last off the board as I checked. John, you can give me the update if it went on the board when I checked this morning. Obviously, that means to me that there's a chance Pat Mahomes plays, or at least some speculation. But if Dalvin Cook went out, I guess Madison would be an all-in play. He fits all the criteria in this specific game. That's obviously not. We're not going to talk about that because that's all speculative. But John, why would a game be off the board? That has to mean Pat Mahomes has at least a 1% chance of playing.
Yeah, if there's any chance of Mahomes playing, that's why the game is off the board, because it's going to be a huge swing in the point spread based on whether he plays or not. It's at least 7 points, could be up to a 10-point move on this spread. So they're not going to take any action until they get some sort of clarity as to Mahomes' status.
Okay, so let's assume for a minute that Mahomes does not play. Where would you guess this line is going to be in Kansas City?
Yeah, Minnesota is going to be favored. It could be 2.5, 3-point favorites, something like that.
Okay, so let's operate on there. So they don't even take money in this game. So
no, they don't want to take anything.
So let's play a game of pretend then. Where do you see the money? You think people, I mean, this is an interesting matchup because even without Mahomes, Kansas City's at home, a little of the shine taken off their, off their status, Andy Reid's system. But this is probably the time where it might be smart to bet them at that number. They're a home dog.
Yeah, it's going to depend on obviously what, where they put this, but they put it at 3 as a home dog, not a terrible spot. And I think you'll wind up seeing the public coming on Minnesota. Like once that backup quarterback comes in, the public tends to shy away from it. Minnesota's been playing a lot better now. Defense looks pretty good. They're going to be able to run the ball, which Kansas City's struggled to stop the run. That was their big problem, even with Mahomes in there, was you could run the ball on them and stay in the game that way. So I think we'll see if we get a word, let's say Thursday or Friday, that Mahomes is definitely out. You should see the public money coming in on Minnesota. Which way the sharps come is going to really depend on where that line falls and possibly which side of the 3 that line falls. So if it comes in -2.5, you might see some Minnesota money coming in also from some sharp bettors. So it's going to depend on where that falls on the 3. Also, the total on this game is probably going to be one of the lower totals, even with Mahomes in there, that Kansas City has all year because that Minnesota defense is pretty good. It's going to be under 50, which you don't get to see all that often from a Kansas City game, but still should be points.
Geek, this one's off the board, so we're not going to spend too much time as we got a little ground to make up here, but all the usual suspects on both sides are possibilities.
I mean, listen, there is an important thing to discuss here. Last week we had a primetime game between the Packers and the Chiefs. And in my breakdown, I said, load up on Aaron Jones because this Chiefs defense is deceptively better versus the pass than what you think. And they're deceptively worse versus the run. The DVOA at the time, now the number has caught up. And if you look at the opponent rank or the DVP number, it's now caught up to essentially what was the DVOA and the yards per carry numbers that we were seeing and the total yardage allowed numbers that we were seeing for the Chiefs. So sometimes that number is deceptive and it was fucking with people's heads a little bit. But I'd looked into the Chiefs DVOA and their average yards per carry, and they were very, very bad. The way you attack the Chiefs is via the run. So Dalvin Cook, once again, actually is the number 1 play on the board in terms of the matchup, plus his skill set and plus everything. The whole combo of everything really puts Dalvin Cook as the top play, even potentially a better play than Christian McCaffrey on paper. Of course, Christian McCaffrey is Christian McCaffrey, and he's a fucking beast. But you get the idea. So that's really the way to attack this game. We also don't know if Adam Thielen's going to play. If Adam Thielen is out, then Stephon Diggs is very interesting. And as far as the pass catchers for KC, I'm just not into it. No Patty, no Kevy.
Hey, if our preseason bet of Pat Mahomes for over 35.5 touchdowns is even going to have a pulse, we need him back for this game. Or
we're going to need a couple of like 6. We need more than 1 5 touchdown performance in a row.
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. So if we get him back in this game, I still think we get him at like.
Hey, so with this game, Cook, if you were drafting season long today, where are you drafting Cook?
Number 2 overall. After McCaffrey.
He's behind CMC. That's what I figured as well. But so just keep that in mind. Like he is becoming that guy. He's matchup proof as well. And in this instance, he's in a phenomenal matchup. So.
John, what we were saying is that about, I think 5 weeks ago, Geek and I had this conversation. We were saying it's time now. Like Dalvin Cook was still buyable in dynasty football. And, he was thought of as, hey, he's having a good year, but he wasn't thought of as in that elite tier that, out where Alvin Kamara, Barkley and the rest of those guys live. But yeah, the window's slammed shut on that. And you just made a really great point. Where would he be drafted 2 overall in dynasty startup, 2 or 3 overall?
I mean, you could make an argument for Zeke, but or Barkley. You could make that argument, but
and you would
win with me.
Yeah, no, I don't even think it's an argument anymore. I think Dalvin Cook is, a young ascending running back on a run first team, and he's healthy now. So anyway,
and very cuffable, which I find as an underrated season long stat. It's very cuffable, and you want that. You want that when you take that guy. You want to be able to spend an 8th rounder on a handcuff that's so fucking good that you're basically locked up with an RB1 no matter what the hell goes on.
Yeah, it's funny. I get a lot of bite back in this Slack for telling people to roster Alexander Mattinson. They're like, why? He's not doing anything. And when I try to tell people it's not what he's doing now, it's like having that like nuclear bomb in your back pocket and being able to hold it out and push the button should something go wrong. So
I have Cook in one. I drafted Cook in one of my leagues, and then some guy drafted Madison kind of early, and he's been trying to like, basically extort me since beginning, and I refuse to go for it.
We call that the swindle. The swindle.
But by the way, when you say extort, like a fair deal, if he wants AJ Brown for
no, but that's not what he wants. That's not what he wants. He wants like Terry McLaurin or something like that.
He was looking for what he was looking for early in the season. He was looking for Sutton.
Yeah,
I'm like, yeah.
Well, Kevin, that's what Madison's going for now. Yeah, that's what he's going for, because he is worth that to the Dalvin Cook owner, just not at this point. In week 12, as you're entering the playoffs, sure, your fourth wide receiver that's really good, better than any of his two, it's definitely worth it. But the trade deadline's approaching. It's season-long fantasy football. Redraft is tough like that to make any trades. It's better, trading is a lot easier in the dynasty community. All right, boys, we're going to move on. Chicago, who is not look good. Is that a good way to say it, John? Is going to Philly, who had a yes, that is correct. It's is it still at -5?
Well, let me look right now.
Move? I thought I saw that line move.
-5 is correct.
Yeah, I programmed all these lines in this morning. Total 43.5. I still like Philly, but they have no team speed, so the 5 seems like a lot to me. I would assume that people are just going to say Trubisky sucks and put all the money on Philly, but I think Philly's good. I just think without Deshaun Jackson, I don't trust them for anything more than a field goal win.
Yeah, the public is on Philly. I don't think that's a shock there. The Bears have offensively, they just look terrible. I heard someone today say, if you put Dalton on this team with the Bears, that they might be a contender, which I don't necessarily disagree with. I think any mediocre quarterback can come in here and make this Bears team pretty good. But yeah, it's been brutal. On the total's actually dropped down to 42 to what I'm looking at, with 92% of the money coming in on the under. And again, that's really both of these offenses have been a little bit disappointing. Chicago's been a lot disappointing. So no shock that the public likes this game under. It was originally opening up at 45, and just popping over to my numbers, I'm pretty sure I have that even lower in this game. Actually, I've got it. Yeah, I've got 41 as a total. So, and if you look at based on what's happened so far this year, which is what my numbers look at, Chicago should be a 7-point underdog in this game. So, yeah, this is a tough one to call. I'm actually going to have. I don't want to give it away unless you're a Beat the Bookie member. I will have some.
Don't give that away.
I will have a play. We've been on fire with the games, 5-1 again last week. So I will have a play on this game though. So I'll tease that.
You know how, John, how I know he's confident in what he's doing, because most sports wagerers would never, they would never say how good they're doing because they're afraid to jinx it. Like a lot of sports wagers are like professional ball players. They have all these rituals and routines, and just like, like that thing, like don't talk to the guy who has a no hitter, that stupid thing. Like just let it, like John doesn't care about any of that stuff. He's like, hey, yeah, and I trust my process. I trust my spreadsheets. I trust my system. I trust my eyes. So there's a good advertisement to join Beat the Bookie. You know what, Kevin, before you roll into that, just talk about Beat the Bookie for a second. We'll come back and really hammer it at the end, but tell people quickly how they can sign up and get John's secret sauce.
If you go over. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kev.
Well, I was going to say a little bit, but I'm just going to praise you, John. So let me do a little humble brag for you.
Stop! I love it. I'm
so happy that that we've got this crew over at Beat the Bookie making these picks. 5-1 this past week. Says you were talking about some parlays you picked out of John's choices that were spectacular. You got the money line on the Chargers last week and a couple other sweet ones, but I'm so happy because I go in there myself and understand I'm the honcho or whatever, but I pop over there. I'm like, well, who's John? Who's John on? Who's Ryan on this week? And I'm who's Anthony on?
Where can they find it? Like, tell me the website.
All right, so you go to dfsarmy.com. There's a tab up top that says Beat the Bookie. Click on the Beat the Bookie tab. Get signed up as a Beat the Bookie subscriber. You don't have to be a DFS Army VIP to do this. You can be. If you are, DM John in our team forums and Slack. There's special discount for current DFS Army subscribers. But if you're not, and you're listening to this pod because you just love sports gambling, or you like John and you like his picks, or you like sports gambling models for every sport. If you want to get a lot of action, all of that, whatever it is, go over to dfsarmy.com, click on the Beat the Bookie tab, get signed up as a Beat the Bookie VIP. You'll get into a Slack chat with John, with Ryan, with Luz, with Anthony, our whole crew, experienced sports gamblers.
Wait. There's
cover a different area.
There's a gambling expert named Luz.
Yes, Luz.
Okay, because that doesn't seem like a good name for a guy that is supposed to project winning. That's like the quarterback David Fales. I never thought that was a good name for a quarterback. He was doomed from the start.
How about David Falk? Like he's Falked.
Yeah, I mean, I just the only good one I always thought was if he was a chef, Brandon Cooks would be a really good name for a chef.
That is a good name for a chef. And listen, if you don't want to follow a guy named Luz, you don't have to.
Well, it's like when you call a fat guy tiny. It's like ironic.
Yeah, it's more of an ironic because Luz does win a lot. So
the guys have been doing great. Last weekend for everybody was phenomenal. So those guys have been busting their ass.
The ROI really numbers, and one of the best things I like about it, it's not just about a bunch of dudes saying, hey, here's the fire picks. There are these breakdowns are long, descriptive breakdowns of what the reasoning is, what the models say, what the handicapping should be, what the EV, what your percentage odds are. So you'll see, give this a 40% chance of happening, but the model wants 30%. All kinds of smart sports gambling stuff going on in there. Get signed up now. I mean, this is great. If you don't like daily fantasy sports, DFS is hard. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of involvement. It takes a lot of really being super interested in it. Sports gambling, maybe not so hard. It's not so hard to pick a team and make a bet. It's just one decision, yes or no, and you have a 50-50 odds of it going in your favor. So the experience of winning is a lot more frequent when you're betting on the games rather than trying to put together DFS lineups.
John, we're going to let you do the final pitch at the end of the podcast, so stay tuned if you want to learn a little bit more from the first-person perspective. Thank you, Geek. You were about to tell us where the fantasy gold for DFS is in this game, Chicago at Philly. Go ahead, Geek.
Do we really want anything to do with this game? The answer is no. There is no fantasy gold except for two potential spots. Allen Robinson has just been spectacular this season. We know the Eagles, they have an improving pass defense, a little bit better. They got rid of some troubled personnel in their secondary. I believe Orlando Scandrick was let go by the team recently. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so they're getting their communications issues kind of fixed up a little bit. But it's hard to deny the target share that Allen Robinson's been getting. 25% target share. 16 target day against New Orleans a couple of weeks ago. 7 targets, 9 targets, 7 targets. He's a 7+ target machine. Now it is Mitch Trubisky throwing to him, but he's been very, very good.
We said it last week though that Allen Robinson is very used to poor quarterback play with Trubisky, Blake Bortles, and even before that in college, Christian Hackenberg. We said it last week. Imagine him with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, it's insane to think about.
A cursed sort of career so far, but hopefully that will get better for him before his career is through. But that's the only real place. I mean, one could make an argument for your boy, Anthony Miller.
Love that guy.
3,700 on DraftKings. 9 targets a couple weeks ago, 7 targets a week before. He kind of lucked out last week with a 3-target game. One of them was for a big gainer. So I don't mind Anthony Miller. If we're going to be looking for punt plays to squeeze in McCaffrey and Cook in our lineups. And the only way that's going to happen is via the wide receiver position. And Anthony Miller is one of those guys that can give you a chance there.
Here's a sneak preview of my Dynasty booklet we're going to be doing in the offseason. Anthony Miller is my number 1 buy low.
There it is. He's a buy low candidate. That doesn't mean he's your number 1 wide receiver.
No, it just means you can get him for almost nothing in Dynasty right now, and he is heading to that 3rd-year breakout.
Let's offer a 4th-round rookie draft pick for Anthony Miller. But looking further through this game, Zach Ertz interests me. His salary comes down. He hasn't had a good game pretty much this year. So we know at some point you have to accept that this is who we are now, right? We're at the halfway point of the season. Ertz is no longer the volume machine that he has been the last few years. Dallas Goedert looms large. I don't know. I think maybe he might have hooked up with Wentz's girlfriend, and there's a little animosity going on over there. They each like hot blonde chicks with big boobs. There's a crossover in their attracting to hot chicks, and unlike Kristaps and Luka, who will combine and tag team, these two have more of a rivalry going on, where I believe that is affecting his target share in this offense.
You know what I think is affecting Ertz the most? And John, I'd love to hear your comment on this. I think Deshaun Jackson not being there has just squeezed the middle of the field a little bit, and that's where Ertz operates. And in addition to sleeping with his wife, as the Geek is just insinuating, girlfriend. I think this team misses Deshaun Jackson more than anything else. So I'd like to hear your analysis on that.
I think that's spot on, and I think Wentz has gotten himself out of the flow of this offense from time to time, and he's tried to make the big play, and he doesn't have that big play down the field guy, so where he could throw the ball down the field to a Jackson, like you said, that'll open up the middle of the field. It's just not there. I mean, I'm not particularly high on Wentz myself this week. I'm not particularly high on anyone. I don't like going against the Chicago typically. We have talked about Hicks not being there anymore. They're a little bit more susceptible to the run, but I'm not overly excited here about Wentz. I mean, I've got Wentz in one of my season-long leagues, and I'm staring at him like I don't even know if he's worth, if he's even worth keeping in that league. But it's a deep league, so I have no choice. But yeah, I'm not high on the Philly offense until I see something more out of Wentz here. So I actually like Goddard more than I like Wentz, more than Ertz.
Yeah, I'm with you. We talked about in our preseason our preseason redraft leagues that we thought Zach Ertz being drafted as a top 3 fantasy option, he was more like tight end 6 or 7, and I think that's exactly where he is right now. We love Dallas Goedert to emerge and take over there, especially as Zach Ertz is in the last year of his contract next year. So something to look forward to if they move on from him. Good stuff there, guys. All right. We won't spend a ton of time on this one. We're going to do lightning round just to get through this game, but Washington's going to go visit Buffalo. Buffalo with the big double-digit spread. They're going to be given 10 to Washington. Total pretty low at 37. John, take us through it.
Yeah, quickly, 60% of the cash coming in on Buffalo. No shocker there. The total is just, it's like 36.5 here now with money coming in on the under. Just probably a sick game or a terrible game to watch, one that will make you sick, and not a ton of DFS value. Maybe Allen a little bit, maybe he runs a touchdown in, but we'll see what the Geek says.
Let me throw this at you, John. Is this horrific line reflective of Dwayne Haskins potentially starting here?
Yes, but I don't think it changes all that much. I think it's the difference between the two is it's like I believe it's 2 points between Keenum and Haskins. So
I know it's not clear. Yeah, it's not clear who's going to start. It may be Haskins here. And wow, I mean, Haskins has been
deer in headlights, man.
Wait, who was that guy from Buffalo that was like a 5 interception machine every time he played?
Peterman.
He's Nate Peterson level. He's Nate Peterman level. Like we might have to fire up Bill's defense this week and sort of forego the Patriots cheat code because there may be a Dwayne Haskins is worse than Peterman cheat code that is going to be in play here. And let me just check the numbers on the salary of these defenses. And the reason I'm talking about defense is the only play I'm interested in this game.
In all fairness, though, like if there is a silver lining here, look how bad Jared Goff looked in year 1. I still have hope for Haskins for next year if they get an offensive-minded quarterback whisperer type coach, and maybe they're a college coach. So I know for this game, DFS, we're still in the same situation. But for those of you who drafted Dwayne Haskins in your Superflex leagues and Dynasty, it's not stick a fork in them yet. Jared Goff came back to be an elite QB.
And definitely don't care about long-term. All I care about is what's going to happen today.
I agree.
Or on Sunday in this specific game, and how can I take advantage of that to line my pockets with green? And so, in the case of Dwayne Haskins, man, if you didn't already know, throw Terry McLaurin, the F1. I really got to work on a nickname for him.
I call him Catch TMC.
all right. I mean, catch TMC. That's all right. Okay, for us old guys who remember Run DMC,
Right. And they
the
were
millennials don't even know who that is.
Well, they were calling Christian McCaffrey Run CMC.
Yeah, I don't
So
know.
I call him Catch TMC.
We're gonna keep working.
It's at least a good for a placeholder. Would you agree? It's good enough to be a
We're gonna have
placeholder.
to keep working on that. But yeah, don't touch anything on Washington. Nothing. And then on the Bill side, I mean, do you want to play John Brown? Okay, but that's about it. Bills defense, maybe John Brown. Some people are going to talk about playing Allen here. Allen is priced way too high on DraftKings for me to find him. His ceiling has not been what we see from Lamar Jackson or even Kyler Murray. His ceiling has been 21 points. He's just not doing it. He didn't approach what he did at the end of last year. He hasn't given us the 30-point games. There's no reason to pay $6,500 on DraftKings for this guy when Russell Wilson's hanging out there pretty close, or Aaron Rodgers is right about the same, or even like a Dak Prescott, who is in a spectacular spot, is in a similar price range. So, of course, that's the Thursday through Monday, but nonetheless, too expensive. The only thing I'm interested in here is Bills defense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I agree. A team that people didn't have much hope for was Oakland. And, I always thought the market was a little soft on Oakland. Detroit's going there this week. Oakland's a 2-point favorite, a high total of 50.5 points. I'm looking forward to both of your analysis to see where it is. John, the public's got to be a little bit more interested in Oakland than they were a few weeks ago.
Not you would think that, but they're not. Detroit is getting about 70% of the money at the +2, and I think the public is still not buying Carr, but
yeah. But isn't he good enough to support? I mean, you got Darren Waller, who's basically automatic every week, and my guy Tyrell Williams, and we'll let the Geek break down the individual players. But do you agree that Oakland is a better team than their public perception right now?
I don't think there's any doubt about it. I mean, just from my numbers, this game should be actually Oakland 2.5-point favorite, so I have it kind of flipped. And that
may be a sneak preview of a potential bet.
Well, I don't use my model's more trend based. It's not based on the numbers that I post out there, but it is a good point of reference just to kind of look at where teams, how they are in relation to what the public may think. And yes, Oakland is definitely being undervalued by the public. We look at the total of 50, I believe it's a 50.5 now, and money's coming in 60-40 to the overside. So this is going to be one of those games I think Geek's going to have plenty to talk about here with this total. Oakland and Detroit are both, they've been two teams that have been very much involved in a lot of these high scoring stackable type of games.
Yeah, John, so you just said a minute ago, I just want to be clear for anyone listening, is you'd said Oakland, you'd flipped it, but Oakland I'm showing is a 2-point favorite. So you agree, you said your model shows that they're 2.5.
I have them as a 2.5-point favorite, but I'm looking at, let me check another source, because I thought they were favored as well. Yeah, they are favored. The one thing I was looking at had it flipped, which
okay.
was
Just want to be clear, because I always get.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And
I always get that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I cut you off there. Say that again.
Yeah, it pretty much matches. I have it as a 2.5-point favorite, so it actually does match. The one thing I was looking at actually had it incorrect as Detroit favorite there. But yeah, but what we're looking at is Detroit getting points with Oakland, and the market doesn't like Oakland as a favorite, and they've viewed Detroit a little bit. Detroit's always one of those teams where we always expect more from them. They seem to disappoint. Actually, Stafford, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I know Stafford's been a terrible favorite. He's not a favorite in this game, but he's actually been a terrible favorite. And we saw last week as a favorite, they didn't cover against the Giants. That was one of our plays, by the way. But yeah, just keep that in mind when you see Stafford as a favorite. It hasn't fared well in his history.
Geek, a lot of the season-long people spent their whole fab budget on Ty Johnson last week. Didn't work out too well.
Oops.
Where's the running game production going to come in Detroit and the rest of this game?
There won't be. So Detroit has done what we know that Detroit is who we thought they were. Okay, even in the lead up to the season, we said it over and over again. I warned everybody about Kerryon Johnson, not because I had a premonition that he would get hurt, but because this groupthink idea that Detroit was all of a sudden going to go to a single running back or a workhorse running back approach just seemed a little bit far-fetched considering that team's history. And we saw it again last week that, this idea of once Kerryon Johnson goes down, they're now going to go to a workhorse running back approach with the next guy up just didn't come true. They used 3 different guys, different scenarios. Expect that for the rest of the season. So shut down the run game for the Lions, which is a net positive for their passing game. When they're not going to emphasize a single running back, they haven't done that all year, so I don't know how much of a difference it makes. But all in all, it's a net positive for the Detroit passing game. If I look at the Statsational model on Beat the Bookie, DFS Army's Beat the Bookie site, you will see some incredible numbers. Number one, we can't ignore this game. It's got one of the highest totals, 50.5 points. 50.5 points. As a total, it's the second highest on the slate. Oakland projects for 154 yards on the ground and 285 passing yards. So they have one of the highest rushing and passing yardage totals on the entire slate for Oakland. I'm sorry, did I say Detroit?
No, you had it right. Yeah, you had it right.
Okay, Oakland projects for that. So what they're telling us is load up on the pieces from Oakland across the board. The running back, Jacobs, has the rare 100 rating from the DFS Army running back rating system. For good reason, obviously. The team is projected to run for 154 yards. But the passing game is projected to get 285 yards. So you're talking Waller, you're talking the Gazelle, Tyrell. Everything about the Oakland side is strong here, and they have a very focused offense. So, I mean, you could talk about some of the secondary pieces, the let me jump over here, but the Hunter Renfros of the world, and maybe the Zay Joneses of the world, if you want to talk about those guys. But I mean, it's Tyrell Williams, it's Darren Waller for this team, and it's Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is borderline the best play on the board at running back.
And now he's starting to get some pass catching work in the last couple outings, so that's only going to make him more valuable. What a fantasy commodity he is, man.
And again, let's not overemphasize the passing game. Where I don't want to expect too much out of him. He's still 2 or 3 targets per game.
Right, but it's gone up in the last couple of weeks. It went from like 0, remember, in college, he was a pass-catching running back. That's what
There's no reason they don't throw to him a lot, but they just haven't quite gotten there yet. But the potential is there, right? And now for the Lions side of it, we just go right back to the plays that have been working. Matt Stafford is a great play. Danny Effin Amendola. I wrote up Danny Amendola. I wrote Danny Effin, spelled out EFF.
That makes sense.
Amendola last week. I don't know why I did that. I usually just say the word, but
yeah, but it's funnier that way sometimes.
Yeah, it was funnier that way, I thought too.
I think it's funny.
And he delivered. He was on my sheet last week. Danny Effin Amendola delivered for 8 targets, 95 yards. Almost got me the bonus. Oh, he got me those 5 more. John, the difference between that last pass, those 5 yards, that 1.5 plus 3, it's like the difference between finishing, 70th and 10th or 9th. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's such a margin that it's such a huge difference.
I hate those bonuses, though. Anyway, they're so arbitrary. But
well, that's the Draftkings way.
We're living the world we live in.
Up for it when we play there. So, that difference. But the whole passing game, Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones Jr., everybody's jacked up in salary, so be careful with it. I'm only playing them with Matthew Stafford for the most part because of the jacked up salaries, except for Amendola. Amendola's stand-up player, but lots of pieces in this game, lots of goodness. So we are targeting the pass game for the Lions and the entire offense for the Raiders. Neither team plays defense. That's always a nice thing.
Hey, John, do you think the Raiders are one of the teams that can sneak up in the draft next season and grab a quarterback? Is this the last we've seen of Carr?
I don't think so. Not if they continue to play the way they have. I mean, look at Gruden's history. He's kind of taken these journeyman type quarterbacks. He's done well with these quarterbacks. So I think Gruden has taken this on as a project. And Carr's you could win with these type of guys but you got to have the pieces around them. And I think that's what they're probably better off focusing on. I think Carr's good enough if you have the right pieces.
Yeah, I could see Gruden signing someone like Andy Dalton and having 2 veterans on that team and just creating competition. So interesting. I love the offseason stuff as much as I love the DFS in season. Okay, guys, Cleveland going to Denver. Denver getting 3 at home. Cleveland getting some respect on the road. Look at this. The total is 39. John, take us through it.
So yeah, we've got Denver plus, home dog. They've been in this spot before. And the entire public here, everybody seems to like Cleveland. About 90% of the cash coming in on that side, and the tickets are coming in that way as well. So seems to be everyone's in agreement there. Another one of these totals that's just kind of blah for DFS standpoint, and it's 50-50 on the money. So not a lot of information there as to which way the public's going. I mean, there's 60% of the tickets coming in on the under, but the money's 50-50. So perhaps that's a little bit of an indication we may get some more points than anticipated. But I don't know. I mean, how excited could we get? We got a new quarterback here for Denver. You've got Cleveland's offense that just hasn't shown much outside of the running back. So be curious to see what Geek thinks about it.
Yeah, Geek, just before you get into it, I mean, losing Joe Flacco, is that really a downgrade? I know they're going to late round pick Brandon Allen to get in there and toss the rock until Drew Lock is either off IR already, but I don't see that really much of a downgrade. Joe Flacco is playing pretty poorly.
It is a downgrade. This is a guy coming in who's not a prospect. He's some late round pick that has been a body there, just taking up space, waiting for their sort of the future quarterback in Drew Lock. So for me, yes, I do think it's a big downgrade. I have a lot of concerns about who this guy is.
Well, Brandon Allen, I'll give you a little history. He was 2015. He was drafted in the 6th round by the Jaguars. Hey, the Jaguars have drafted another 6th round QB that's doing all right. His name is Gardner Minshew. Now, I know that's connecting some pretty squiggly dots.
Once New England drafted a guy in the 6th round, then
they're making my narrative sheet for that. No, point is that, you're right. He doesn't have the draft pedigree, but he's a tough-nosed player, and I don't think he's a 0.
I don't know anything about this kid. I did not see him play in the preseason. I don't remember his name coming up as like, hey, guys, in the 3rd quarter, Brandon Allen's coming in and he's going to do some damage.
So, the market thinks it's about a 4-point differential between the two, between Flacco
and as bad as Flacco is, for him to be a 4-point better. So that's a significant right there. That's a significant concern. So I think that this Denver offense is going to be a disaster. You want to stay the fuck away from it. In a sense, I might have liked Lindsey / Hoyce Freeman, like in a bubble, if Flacco was at the helm. But as I reconsidered this game, started thinking about how few fantasy scoring opportunities the Broncos are actually like to have in this sort of a spot. I've gotten off of even the idea of including them in my player pool at all. I don't think they're player pool worthy. They're going to split touches. You can't make a decision. Josh, DFS Up North, pointed out something beautiful to me, that the issue with Lindsey is he can't pass protect at all. So whenever there's an opponent that can rush the quarterback, they're really going to favor Hoyce Freeman in the passing situations in those games, because even though Lindsey is a little more talented at that part of the game, he can't pass block. So the pass protection concerns really keep Hoyce Freeman in there a little bit more. But overall, it's a real disaster. You can't really even play Cortland Sutton here. Just this new quarterback is too mysterious. The price for Sutton is too high. I don't mind the pieces like the Chubb. I don't love Chubb as a player, but I like the idea of combine as a player in this game. I'm sorry. I do love Chubb as a player. I don't love this matchup for Chubb in a bubble, because Denver's defense is deceptively better versus the run than most people think. But I think what trumps Denver defense being pretty decent is with this new neophyte quarterback. I think that Cleveland defense is in play, and I like the idea of using them with Nick Chubb as a secondary stack along with other line. Again, in lineups where you want to get silly and not use Patriots or Bills defense, you can use Cleveland defense in this spot, much lower owned. Let's see if they're a little bit cheaper. Come on, no whammies. a little cheaper, 3,100. So you save a little bit, and you combine them with Nick Chubb in some tournaments, and we'd be in good shape.
So, sometimes though, when these backup quarterbacks come in, they've been practicing with like the third and fourth wide receivers. So I don't, again, you probably wouldn't do this anything more than a dart throw or maybe in your season long league. But I think Deshaun Hamilton, who's been practicing with Brandon Allen, it could be some sort of instant. I know, again, that's more of narrative. I'm not saying it applies to this specific situation, but a lot of times these connections do happen. There's some instant chemistry there, maybe some sneaky value. Anyway, on the Cleveland side, are there any of the receivers? Is Odell Beckham has just not been good this year? Can you play him? I keep playing him in my DFS lineups. Obviously, it's not been a good decision. But is this the week he's sub 10% owned?
He will be sub 10% owned. He's pretty cheap. Again, Denver defense, very good, allowing the least fantasy points to opposing wide receivers this year. And Cleveland kind of sucks. Offensively, not looking good. I'm going to check the stats model because that's my go-to. And you can see here that where the hell is this game?
It's not good.
What are we seeing for a total passing yardage for Cleveland?
181.
I mean, that's like the worst number. Like, what are they? The Jets? So, what are they? Miami? Like 189 yard projected. That's because Denver is not giving up. It's not just that that number comes from, just so people know, it's not John's imagination. That number is saying, teams who come into Denver, they score a lot less yards per average via the pass than they do against average teams. And Cleveland just in general doesn't put up a lot of passing yards every week. So that combination is like under 200 yards total passing. I need Odell Beckham to get me 200 yards.
Yeah.
Or I'm getting excited.
Hey, John, snap call, real life decision. Who'd you rather have, Baker Mayfield or Daniel Jones? Not fantasy. Who'd you rather have for your quarterback, for your real team?
I'm taking Daniel Jones.
Isn't that amazing, Geek? Isn't that amazing that's definitely the consensus? Do you remember in the preseason when everyone was saying Danny Dimes sucked? Well, I was saying slow your roll a little bit. I obviously didn't expect him to be, just really good like this, but I said that let's give the guy a chance,
A lot of misconceptions on Baker Mayfield. We'll see if he could turn that perception around. And that's what happens when you have 3 good games at the end of a season. All of a sudden, the whole world is like, hey, Baker Mayfield is now the number 4 ranked quarterback of the season.
There was a lot of reason to believe. Let's round it out, boys. Tampa, Seattle. I'm really excited for this game. I think hopefully it could be some good offensive football. Tampa Bay going into Seattle. Seattle getting not quite the touchdown, John, 6.5, total 51.5. I would imagine that under the touchdown, the more money is pouring in on Seattle. But it's tough to tell nowadays where the tickets are going.
No, it's coming in. The tickets are so the public really likes Seattle. It seems like the smarter money's coming in on Tampa though. So there's more money on Tampa, more tickets on Seattle at this number. And then if we go over to the total, you've got the tickets and the money kind of lining up in the same direction, and that's on the under, which is a little surprising. So I think Tampa and the under seems to be where some of the smarter people are playing this game. When I look at my numbers, I actually, the last couple of weeks, I've made note in the article that I do that coincides with these numbers that Geek has been talking up. And I just think Tampa has been a bit, when you look at the numbers, they're underrated. And I think part of the problem there is the fact that the quarterback, they can move the ball, but the quarterback makes such poor decisions in the red zone that while they're getting the yardage that the system expects, system is looking at yardage and expecting that to be converted into points. And it doesn't always happen with Tampa. But if you go back and look at all the games they played this year, they missed a chip shot field goal against the Giants. Last week, they get absolutely screwed on that early whistle, right? They should have won that game. They were really competitive against a San Francisco team that now looks to be, possibly the best team in the NFC. And in that game, again, the turnovers kind of bit Winston. So this is a team that's a lot better than the record shows. And Seattle on the other side, they're one of those teams we talked about earlier where Wilson is a guy who just seems to exceed his team, the statistics. So he does better than his team should do, because he just doesn't make those mistakes, the same type of mistakes that Winston does. So real interesting game. By the numbers, I would think this game should have been a lot tighter spread, but I understand why Tampa is getting 6 points.
Okay. That will this one be one of your favorite picks of the week, or is this just kind of mixed in with a bunch of others?
It won't be. This won't be one of my games, but I'm real curious. If I was just kind of, if I was in an office pool, I would be taking the points here.
Okay, Geek. This one reeks of fantasy goodness. Just tell me the reason why both Chris Godwin and Mike Evans can't do good in the same. Why do they have to force it all to one guy every week and the other guy gets shut out?
Eventually both of them will be involved, but that is a thing with Tampa. Why that happens, I have no idea. But I do want to talk about the same thing I talk about every single week about every Tampa game and every Tampa opponent. There is a beautiful thing that happens when Tampa comes to town. Okay, number one, you have a team that cannot run the football, and they don't even bother trying. So they're going to be throwing all game. They only throw to two guys, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So we have a pretty good idea of who's going to get all of the goodness. On the flip side, they can stop the run. So their opponent is forced to throw the football. I don't know how many weeks in a row we're going to have the same conversation. Now, last week, I said, hey, let's load up on Tannehill. Let's stack him up with Chris Davis. Let's stack him up with Corey Davis. Let's stack him up with A.J. Brown. Let's stack him up with who the tight end?
Jonnu Smith.
Yeah, let's stack him up with whoever, and even include a little bit of the wide receiver whose name I always forget.
What the wide receiver on which team?
On Tampa's third wide receiver.
Oh, okay. So you were talking about?
No, actually, no. I'm thinking of a different. I was thinking of I was thinking of the Titans' third wide receiver, Adam Humphries. Right.
Okay.
So I said, load up on these guys because the only way to attack the Tampa defense is via the pass. They stop the run. It happened again, right? And it's going to happen here. So Chris Carson, you would expect. What are the games when Russell Wilson doesn't have his spectacular Russell Wilson MVP magic going on? It's when they can lean on Chris Carson and they don't bother with it. So it's like, I'm not going to throw. I'm going to lean on Chris Carson here, right? That should not be the case this week. So we are going, even last week, Atlanta, great game. Atlanta couldn't score. They couldn't put pressure on Seattle. So Russell Wilson did what he had to do to get out of there with the W. That's what Seattle does. So my assumption here is you have a Tampa team that can score. They can stop the run. They can't stop the pass. Russell Wilson should do Russell Wilson things. The negative or the problem with this situation, and I love Russell Wilson naked in cash. He's the best play on the board at QB. You do have
for those who are her newer listeners, and we're gaining, I hear new people all the time. They tweet me. They say, "Oh, I just found your podcast." Explain quickly what naked means.
When I say naked, I mean when you roll out a quarterback without one of his pass catchers stacked to him in your lineup. So running him naked is just, hey, I got Russell Wilson, but I didn't play Tyler Lockett. I didn't play Jaron Brown.
DK.
I didn't play David Moore. And I didn't play DK Metcalf. Right? Now, the reason I'm saying to roll him out naked is because the salaries, if you play on DraftKings or FantasyDraft, the salaries for his ancillary pieces has gone up to the point where it has exceeded the type of volume that those players get as a consistent volume. I can't trust Tyler Lockett to make me value when he hasn't exceeded really 7 targets since week 3. He is a 4 to 7 target guy, regardless of the game script most of the time. Can that possibly expand in a single game? Yes. But should we count on it? We should not. Right? So then you've got DK Metcalf, a guy who's coming off a 2-touchdown performance, but it was on 5 targets, 3 catches. So even with 2 touchdowns last week, he was only able to get you 16 fantasy points. And now he's almost 6K, the same price as Allen Robinson, aforementioned, who's getting 25% of the targets in his offense and has been between 8 to 13 targets every single week, where this guy hasn't passed 4 or 5. So I don't want to pay that for him. Even Jaron Brown, David Moore, risk of getting you a 0 every single week. These guys are kind of interchanged in that offense. So I love this game. I love this game from a passing game format for the Seattle, but unfortunately, I can't really trust any of the pass catchers. So I want to get all of the tutties through Russell Wilson and just maybe play it as a stack.
He could even run one in, it's like,
that's right. You're getting all the touchdowns. As long as Chris Carson isn't scoring touchdowns, and he shouldn't against Tampa, you get all the touchdowns with Wilson. On the flip side, Jameis pick Sixton for all of his terribleness. And I said this last week. I got Jameis Winston and his 27 points in tournaments. We talked about it here on the Vegas Lines pod. If you watched it, John, I know you played some Jameis.
I did.
Because you sat right here and we talked about it. Jameis was 1% owned. And I said, what the fuck are people doing? This is Jameis Winston. They don't run the football. He's going to throw nonstop. He's gonna put, even in a 5 interception game, he puts up 21 points. Last week, 2 interceptions, still got you to 27. This guy, while he doesn't win games with his style of play for some reason, turning it over all the time, he's like vintage Ryan Fitzpatrick. Fitzmagic. Like he just puts up numbers every single week. And I don't see any reason why this road game at Seattle, he shouldn't do the same exact thing. Be throwing the whole game. Couple of turnovers, gonna happen. They're not gonna try to run. They're not even gonna bother. And he'll get you the 3. Hopefully he can cross the 300-yard threshold, throw for a touchdown or 2, and get anywhere from 21 to 29 fantasy points for a, I'm going to say, reasonable salary level compared to his peers.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You didn't mention anything about the Tampa running game for good reason. I think they are a lock next year to grab one of these amazing running backs coming up in the draft. And I have a feeling we'll be talking about the Tampa running game next year when we talk DFS. So, John Alicia, Kevin the Geek, you guys did it again. You laid knowledge on the people. You did well. You represented the DFS army to the fullest, and we thank you. And we're just going to do, we're running a little over here. So we talked a little bit about Beat the Bookie. John, just tell us quickly what you're promoting, what you're working on, where people can find you on Beat the Bookie.
Yeah, Beat the Bookie. When you sign up, you'll get access to our Slack chats, which I think is just invaluable. It's not just me. There's 3 other guys there that are not only giving you their models, and these are quant guys. These are guys with trading backgrounds. Pretty bright guys there. So they're not just giving out the models, but they're also helping you with your bankroll management, exactly how to bet, how to become a smarter bettor, how to be sharper. So it's more than just, hey, here's a model, and then you try to figure it out. So there's guys available in those Slack chats, myself included. More than happy to help you guys out and teach you a little bit more about how this game works.
Yeah, and you see, if you're watching on our video cast, you see John's Statsational tag up there. That use his promo code in order to get a discount on the VIP membership. We're going to have to shorten your promo code to Stat. I think that would be better, easier for the people. But definitely use his code. And John is there to help you, to teach you how to become a better sports wagerer. I can attest to of reading some of his material last week and really actually learning a thing or two that I had not previously realized in my last 25 years of sports wagering. So thank you, John. Geek at F Football Geek. You're always available on Twitter. You're always available in the Slack chat, dropping knowledge to the people. Tons of podcasts, tons of game breakdowns.
Yeah.
Join.
Let me speak real quick to DFS Army and what's going on right now. We're in the swing season. NFL going strong. NBA happening. NBA is just ramping up right now. Projections have been on point. Our cheat sheets, part of what we do. Again, I was talking about Cuggy's big win this past week, and the beauty of it was all of the plays, or almost every play out of one, came right off the cheat sheet that I put out every single week. And we do the same thing for basketball. You have Keg putting out NBA sheets along with a staff of really, really sharp players. But Keg is out there every single. Keg is a top 50 ranked NBA player, one of the best players in the world. He's sharing his core plays. He's giving you a path. You combine it with projections, with our rating systems. There's so much information, and we love NBA. It's every single day. You have zero chance of being successful at it without being in a group like ours. There are some other ones, some inferior ones, but there are other ones that exist that you could go to. But if you're trying to just wing it, watching basketball games, I'll figure it out. No, you won't. You will lose money. I promise you. It's impossible to be successful at daily fantasy basketball. And, oh, by the way, MMA is going nuts this weekend. There's a great card on Saturday. We've got breakdowns from the GOAT himself, Big Marley. We've got Daily Fantasy Sniper. I get involved with the MMA team when NFL ends. So there's all this great stuff happening. You've got Season Long Sez in there helping you with your season-long sit-start decisions. and not just fantasy football, now fantasy basketball as well. So whatever you're doing in fantasy, we're there to help you. All of our staff is around. They're answering your questions constantly.
There's some maniac. There's some maniac Eric in there doing fantasy tennis.
You got fantasy tennis. Look at me. Do I look like a person that sleeps? I slept 2 hours last night. That's what I do. I live and breathe in the DFS army. You don't get to look. You don't get bags like this from getting a good night's rest.
Perfect.
Preparation H, by the way, really works nice to get the bags under your eyes.
You know what? That is true.
I'm going to take you up on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of my model friends tell me that. So.
I need to ask my nutritionist, Stacy says, if putting Prep H on your face will get me chemicals in my bloodstream.
Yeah, they'll take away the wrinkles, but certainly the chemicals. And also, just remember, everybody, like, subscribe to the DFS Army YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, and on the YouTube channel, ring the bell, and you will get alerts when we go live. We are just pumping out content right now from all shapes and sizes, different sports, season-long, DFS, everything. We are expanding, just trying to put out a good product to you people. You can see us in a lot of different places. If you have anyone that we missed on this DFS slate that you want to hear about, just tweet at any of us, and especially tweet at the Geek 10 minutes before kickoff. He loves that. All right, boys.
I'll always be there because I'm going to prioritize randos tweeting me than I will my many thousands of dollars that I have riding on getting my lineups ready for lock. So yeah, sure.
Last little plug. Check out John is featured in Statsational. John Statsational, as you see him there in the below window, is featured in a brand new podcast called Beat the Bookie Podcast. We already have 2 episodes up. You can find them on our YouTube page or in our pod stream. They are great, actionable sports wagering advice, and we always have funny anecdotal stories. John told last week a story about how he was in on a fixed game through a tip when he was a young man at 20-something years old, and the player that was in on the fix got hurt right away, and John, let's just say, lost all his profits. So go check out that story. It's unbelievable in our 2nd episode of Beat the Bookie. Boys, miss you when I don't see you. Hopefully I'll see you again later this week, John, if we do another pod. Geek, I'll be talking to you this week, asking you some of those good DFS tips. Everyone else, go join DFS Army. Adios.